Hello and welcome to WION Live broadcast from Washington DC. I'm Nick Harper and these are the headlines. Moscow announces it has begun retreating from Ukraine's southern city of Kherson, as Kiev claimed it has recaptured a dozen villages in the strategic Black Sea region. The EU proposes 2 action plans to address the deteriorating security situation following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, to bolster cyber defence and to allow armed forces to move faster and better across borders. US President Joe Biden returns to the world stage with a spring in his step after the midterm elections that he sees in the global contest between democracy and autocracy. Good guys don't always come last. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who's been shunned by the West over his offensive in Ukraine, will not travel to Indonesia for the G20 Leaders Summit next week. Twitter owner Elon Musk, in an email to employees, says that remote work will no longer be allowed and that they will expect to be in the office for at least 40 hours a week. US President Joe Biden returns to the world stage after the midterm elections. Biden is set to attend the COP27 climate summit in Egypt, an ASEAN regional summit in Cambodia, and the gathering of the G20 major economic powers in Indonesia next week. Biden still faces turmoil if Republicans are confirmed to have narrowly won the House of Representatives. But he argues that the US allies can now relax after a mostly smooth election and the surprisingly strong democratic results. At the G20, Biden will rub shoulders with key European and Asian allies. Biden is also set to meet China's President Xi Jinping, where the US president wants both leaders to lay out what their red lines are and resolve areas of conflict, including issues such as the self-governed island of Taiwan. When it comes to relations with Russia, Biden says the Kremlin will even seem to have been waiting for the outcome of the election before announcing its retreat from the city of Kherson.
I'm going to be going to the G20. I'm told that President Putin is not likely to be there, but other world leaders are going to be there in Indonesia. And we're going to have an opportunity to see what the next steps may be.
Analysts predict at COP27, Biden will flag the successful package through Congress this year of one of the biggest US spending packages to address climate change, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. It includes almost $370 billion for things such as clean energy. In Asia, Biden will tout a resilient US economy, which, despite high inflation, continues to see low unemployment and a resurgence in manufacturing. However, none of this will eliminate the lingering questions in the minds of US Democratic allies over the durability of Biden's vision. Well, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tarani is joining us live from New York City. Susan, the president preparing now to head overseas later on today. What can we expect from Biden as he prepares to meet world leaders over the next few days?
Well, the president really laid out an agenda during that speech and a press conference with reporters yesterday. He really was asked about whether or not, he will hammer in on, as you mentioned, America's agenda on the Energy Reduction Act. That a lot of that was regarding climate change. The United States hopes to be really on the forefront and a world leader when it comes to climate action. Now, to what extent this rhetoric can turn into reality is yet to be seen. But I think the president hopes to not only after not seeing that huge defeat that was expected in the midterms, he hopes to once again re-engage with world leaders, hopes to bring them on board, and say that America is really still at the forefront and committed to its global agenda.
And you mentioned that global agenda there, but how much do you think the midterm election results, the ones that are still coming in, will reassure allies around the world about Biden's world vision?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, considering the fact that these midterms were really nail-biters, and we really didn't see a sweeping victory, for a lack of a better word, from either side. On the one hand, we have to see what happens with the House ultimately, and to an extent with the Senate. But Biden's remaining legislative agenda really hangs in the balance. And if he ends up becoming a lame duck president, then, whether or not the Republicans decide to work with him on a lot of the issues domestically, that might be a greater challenge than a lot of his agenda on the international front, at least when it comes to the issue of Ukraine, dealing with Russia. I think the Republicans and Democrats are on the same page. However, when it comes to, a huge spending on climate issues, that's where the Republicans really might not have that kind of appetite. And I think America's international partners know that. So I think that'll be interesting to watch.
Susan Tarani live in New York City for us. Thank you, Susan. Well, in the United States, it's still unclear who will win the race to hold Congress. Will it be the Democrats or will it be the Republicans? One thing which seems to have influenced the voters, though, is the state of the economy and the fear of recession. And a day after the Democrats performed better than expected in the midterm elections, US President Joe Biden has spoken on the economy and said he is optimistic that the country is not near a recession.
I am optimistic because we continue to grow and at a rational pace. We are not anywhere near a recession right now in terms of the growth, but I think we can have what most economists call a soft landing.
He even added that the steps taken to lower inflation would need more time to take effect. The US president's comments come as the results of the midterm polls are still awaited, with some races still too close to call. Tensions between the world's two largest economies, China and the United States, have been tested on various occasions, mainly due to the divergent positions over Taiwan. And tensions have grown ever since US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan back in August, as China views the self-governed island part of its own territory. And in the latest, US President Joe Biden has said that he plans a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping to discuss the growing tension between Washington and Beijing over the island of Taiwan. Biden hopes to hold these talks on the sidelines of the G20 summit, which is scheduled to take place in Bali on the 15th of November.
And so what I want to do with him when we talk is lay out what kind of each of our red lines are, understand what he believes to be in the critical national interests of China, what I know to be the critical interests of the United States, and to determine whether or not they conflict with one another. And if they do, how to resolve it and how to work it out.
Moreover, the US president has said that he is not willing to make any fundamental concessions when he meets with the Chinese leader, as Biden on 3 different occasions has indicated that he's ready to commit the US military to defend Taiwan if China tries to invade the island. In addition to that, when the 2 heads of state meet each other in person for the first time, the US president has said that he will also hold talks on fair trade and regional relationships with China. Taiwanese experts are expecting the US policy concerning Taiwan to remain largely the same after the midterm elections. But at the same time, they are cautioning that decision-making could be slowed down if Republicans take control of the House of Representatives.
不过我本来就不认为说拜登政府他在对中立场上有比较 soft 一点，有比较示弱一点哦，所以我觉得是维持原来美国对中国的这样一个戒心跟态度这样。那对于台美关系的话，我觉得基本上也不会有太大的变化，因为共和党通常也会对台湾比较友善一点。
Some security experts expect the Republican Party to support a potential free trade agreement with Taipei in the future. The comments follow the conclusion of 2 days of trade talks between Taiwan and the United States in New York. The meetings are part of the US-Taiwan Initiative on 21st Century Trade, a program that's opposed by China, which views self-governing Taiwan as its own territory. According to the Office of the US Trade Representative, both sides had agreed to hold additional meetings, quote, in the near future. Meanwhile, China calls on the United States to stop distorting the One China principle.
Taiwan 问题是中国核心利益中的核心，一个中国原则是中美关系政治基础中的基础。3个联合公报是中美关系最重要的护栏，美方应该做的是停止虚化、掏空、歪曲一个中国原则，恪守尊重他国主权和领土完整，不干涉内政的国际关系基本准则，回到中美3个联合公报和一个中国原则上来。
The Russian military has been ordered to pull out of the Ukrainian city of Kherson amid a Ukrainian counteroffensive. Russia's defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, the Russian commander in Ukraine, has ordered pulling out of the troops. Kherson city was the first urban hub captured by Russia during its special military operation. It was the only regional capital controlled by Moscow's forces since the offensive began on February the 24th. Officials in Kiev reacted with caution. They say the Russian army is unlikely to leave the strategic city without a fight.
They have been preparing for this defense for a long time, and for 2 weeks we knew that they were preparing defense lines and that they were not ready to hold the right bank. Nothing surprised us, but we understand that we will still have to fight.
In the current conditions, the city of Kherson and the surrounding settlements cannot be fully supplied and cannot operate. People's lives are constantly endangered by shelling. The enemy is firing indiscriminately into the city, possibly using prohibited methods of warfare.
For Russia, losing the Kherson region would return important access for Ukraine to the Sea of Azov. The retreat will put pressure on Russian control of the rest of the Kherson region. However, Kyiv is still sceptical of Moscow's intentions, as the Ukrainian forces appeared to be holding off from launching a major advance into the area. According to Ukrainian troops near the Kherson front line, Russian forces are destroying bridges and mining roads as they leave. Russian-installed officials have been evacuating tens of thousands of civilians from Kherson in recent weeks, but Kiev says this includes forced deportations, which it states is a war crime. And many in villages in the Kherson region wonder how much longer Putin will fight.
I was standing in my garden when 15 meters from me something landed. I'm alive. I'm alive, and here you see the impact crater. We stood here with our neighbor, but who hit us, nobody knows.
There's one well for the whole village over there. I think they cleaned the well, but there's not much water in it. One well for the whole village.
In a latest statement, US President Joe Biden has said that he hopes that the Russian President Vladimir Putin will be more willing to negotiate the release of the WNBA star Brittany Griner. The statement by the US President comes after Russia decided to move the detained US basketball star to a penal colony. More details in our next report.
U.S. officials Wednesday condemned the transfer of U.S. basketball star Brittany Griner to an undisclosed Russian penal colony after authorities moved her from a detention center outside Moscow last week. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken tweeted Wednesday, quote, "We strongly protest the movement of Brittany Griner to a remote penal colony and the Russian government's use of wrongful detentions." The WNBA in a statement also responded, saying it was crushed by the move, calling it a scary, seemingly never-ending nightmare, adding, quote, "The lack of clarity and transparency in the process compounds the pain." The two-time Olympic gold medalist was arrested on February 17th, a week before Russia invaded Ukraine, at a Moscow airport, where she was found to have vape cartridges containing cannabis oil, which is banned in Russia, in her luggage. 32-year-old Griner was sentenced in August to 9 years in a penal colony. She had pleaded guilty but said she had made an honest mistake and had not meant to break the law.
My parents taught me two important things. One, take ownership for your responsibilities, and two, to work hard for everything that you have.
Inmates in Russian penal colonies face a harsh regime of tedious manual work, poor hygiene, and lack of adequate access to medical care. The Biden administration in late July proposed a prisoner swap with Russia to secure Griner's release, as well as that of former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan, but said Moscow had yet to respond positively to the offer.
Well, oil and gas are two products that are crucial to our livelihood and to industries, but their impact on our environment is extremely concerning, so much so that the world is trying to transition towards a cleaner source of energy. However, the world seems far from it, and now the United Nations has found that emissions from oil and gas production could be 3 times higher than initially reported. The official figures are already high. If you multiply that by 3, the result could be even more detrimental to our planet. More than 70,000 sites across the globe are spewing emissions into the atmosphere, according to the UN report. Among these, the top 14 largest emitters are oil and gas extraction sites, and the biggest emitter on the planet sits in Texas. The state is home to one of the largest oil fields in the world. It's crucial at a time when the climate summit, COP27 in Egypt, is ongoing. Even last year, countries pledged to cut emissions, and the United States was one of them. The UN chief has warned countries, and he's called it a wake-up call for governments and the financial sector. He also said that countries need to stop investing in emissions and underwriting fossil fuel production and pollution. These revelations were possible due to a new project introduced by the United Nations. It's a satellite monitoring all kinds of emissions around the world. The UN chief says it will be harder for companies now to cheat. It's using artificial intelligence to analyse data from more than 300 satellites. Thousands of sensors have also been set up on land and in the sea. A top Iranian actor has posted an image of herself on Instagram without a headscarf. This is to stand in solidarity to the ongoing anti-hijab protests against the government. Tarani al-Dusti's act of defiance comes as weeks of protests have rocked the country since the death of Masha Amini. The 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman died in mid-September after being arrested by the morality police in Tehran for allegedly flouting the country's strict dress rules for women. The Iranian actor Ali Dusti also held a sign reading "Woman, Life, Freedom in Kurdish. The slogan has become a common rallying cry among the protesters. Aladusti, best known for her role in the Oscar-winning film The Salesman, has nearly 8 million followers on Instagram. Earlier, the actor vowed to remain in Iran at any price and paused her work to support the families of those killed or arrested in the protest crackdown. Local human rights activists say at least 328 people have been killed and over 14,000 others have been detained in demonstrations sparked by the death of Masha Amini in police custody. The anti-hijab protests are refusing to die down across Iran, even after it began nearly 2 months ago. Elon Musk is trying out different things to overhaul Twitter. Now he's shared another detailed vision for the company. Twitter may enter the payments market. The idea was discussed during a live-streamed meeting with Twitter advertisers. Musk suggests in the future users would be able to send money to others that are also operating on the platform. They could move their money out of Twitter by transferring it to an authenticated bank account. A media report has also hinted at such moves. The report says Twitter last week had filed registration paperwork that would allow it to process payments. A business needs to register with the government before it can conduct money transfers, exchange currency or cash checks. We know that Elon Musk has been pushing to make money from Twitter, be it from the paid verification model that requires a payment of $8 a month or the paywalled video feature that would allow creators to charge for access to their content. Musk believes the new ecosystem could pave the way for a payment system on the platform. And that's not all. In the longer term, Musk may establish bank accounts on Twitter's platform and pay a high interest rate to attract users. It could become a competitor to Apple's recently launched savings account for its cardholders. It could even compete with various fintech services or other payments providers like PayPal. Musk seems to have a clear idea to encourage users to retain cash balances within their own ecosystems. The move to enter the payments business could be linked to Musk's larger plan to turn Twitter into an everything app. Having said that, it's important to take whatever Musk says with a pinch of salt. Right now, Twitter is an experimental era, and some ideas could see the light of day, and others might just get abandoned.
Everything the file system. We're having that same issue again. Yeah, everybody quickly.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks very much for joining us on this edition of WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Nick Harper. Thanks for joining us.
Many other